prosecution of felon gangster mafiotic negroidic, the Black Frank Gelada, a gangster judge, therefore unprosecutable, the blackish, menial, negroidic in appearance and demeanor, felon, vicious, parroting puppet, ex-district attorney Nassau County, with no private law experience, detested by all factions, in spite of this solely because of his many-year secret gangsterization and crucifixion of me, this negroidic, low, mafiotic, deadly Black Frank Gelada was then immediately and unprecedentedly and repeatedly, rapidly promoted in spite of tremendous opposition to the present position of second highest state judgeship solely through gangster computer god manipulation. As additional evidence, during the last week of my within-mentioned month-long, worse than a farce Nazi court criminal trial in Nassau County Court, 1958, where dwarfed felon gangster parroting puppet rectum lapper sodomist Judge William Sullivan's ball of fat felon slut wife, she, as planned, sat in the front row, repeatedly stripping her overclothes and completely pulling up her dress and slip and pulling aside her old-fashioned pink bloomers in order to display her anus, her conch. She repeatedly gesticulated and whispered, "I'll give it to you to suck. Finish him." Her husband's dwarfed felon gangster parroting puppet rectum lapper sodomist Judge William Sullivan, flushed-faced in repeated open sodomistic displays, stuck out his tongue, wiggling it, chuckling to her. "You hangman rope gangster felon parroting puppet scum on top playboys can watch my Frankenstein eyesight television playback of this felonious lowly sodomistic display by the felon sodomist Judge William Sullivan and his lowly felon slut wife during my trial in Nassau County Court. After my worse than Nazi court criminal conviction, crucifixion, for years in poverty I suffered hopeless, jobless, character assassination, and isolation in this low, deadly nigger town. I was the repeat target victim of this gangster government's gangsterization and undetectable extermination attempts to shut me up forever with my secrets. Then, in December 14th to 17th, 1965, I attempted to escape this worst mongrel gangster communist country to return to the Slovenic Polish land of my forefathers. Instead, in a gangster-staged parroting puppet deadly conspiracy, I was flown from Kennedy, New York Airport at night to a small distant St. Lawrence River estuary, snowbound small airport under the guise that I was in Warsaw, Poland. Immediately, many, many things proved this to me, including the two big white asbestos shingled hangars with the large Braniff Airways signs on their sidewalls, in addition to the many blurted statements I solicited from the many CIA deadly gangsters, the assassins of me, the many, many parroting puppets all around me. I demanded an immediate flight back to Kennedy, New York Airport. Instead, I was held captive all night, later in chains. I refused both all food and requests I go to sleep. Then CIA police gangsters pretending to be Polish police with no identification beat me bloodily. Later, while my return trip 707 Boeing jet airliner was being serviced for my return trip, I quickly walked into the airplane and saw a CIA gangster with a small electric hairdryer type blower pumping deadly poison nerve gas smoke into secret compartments under the ashtrays in the arms of the chairs, where later I was ordered to sit in the airplane full of CIA underlings, passengers, my assassins, who giggled as they watched me dragged in chains by the airplane by the gangster CIA police gangsters. These deadly gangster CIA passengers, they pressed the frontal panel of the ashtrays in the seat arms to release the deadly poison nerve gas smoke. Indubitably, all of the others deadly CIA underling gangsters aboard this staged return flight, they all had taken the top secret poison nerve gas antidote pill, immuning them from the deadly poison nerve gas smoke. Deadly poison nerve gas smoke was sprayed at me from cigars, cigarettes, and even from ballpoint pens, also from the wig of a woman sitting next to me. Even the Swiss cheese type ice cubes were evaporating into poison nerve gas smoke in all of the free drinks. I got up and went to the rear of the airplane by the rear exit door with a large push-up handle. My Frankenstein brain thoughts broadcasting radio disclosed my intentions. Immediately, the loudspeakers screamed that the flight was over and that our airplane was already preparing to land at Kennedy, New York Airport. You hangman rope sneak gangster playboy scum on top know these facts are true, not only from taking part in such undetectable exterminations, but also you chicanerous, demented, felon, parroting puppet gangsters can watch my Frankenstein eyesight television playback of all these horrible, terrifying, deadly events. When I returned home, Joseph I. Deck, my only brother and deadly felon, murderer, and assassin spy agent against me for this gangster government, he beat me repeatedly, cursing me that I was not exterminated by all of the poison nerve gas smoke, and that I did the impossible in that I kept awake for 3 days and refused all food in order to prevent my sneak extermination. In accordance with the completely gangster computer god concocted and manipulated statutory laws, one of your gangster court's requisite duties is to automatically rehear my said appeal case, because it has been brought to your attention, you hangman rope gangsters, that my entire life was destroyed by you co-conspirators through the gangster government perjured and fabricated criminal conviction of me in order to fulfill the demands of your communist god, the worldwide mad deadly gangster computer god. You deadly parroting puppet felon gangsters already know that I have been and am an innocent primary victim and target for destruction and extermination because I am a menace to your gangster computer god, and that I am worse than defenseless without the gangster protection and control of the gangster Frankenstein earphone radio. I stand alone against you demented, deadly gangster parroting puppets, namely this worst gangster communist computer god-controlled gangster government. Before I'm exterminated by you hangman rope underlings, I demand a reply. October 21st, 1976. Francis E. Deck, Esquire. Addendum. I personally filed my maximum conviction appeal brief in 1961 with the chief clerk of the U.S. Supreme Court, Washington, D.C. The chief clerk, he knew me. He sneeringly grabbed my thick, strong, homemade appeal brief, and then he attempted to rip it up in desperation. The chief clerk of the U.S. Supreme Court ripped off the cover of my appeal brief. Miraculously, I stopped him without a deadly scene to me. Then, filing my ripped appeal brief, the felon, another co-conspirator with the 9 hangman rope gangster judges, the chief clerk, in cowardly fear, in staccato speech and gesticulation, he confessed to me, Mr. Deck, everyone is in on this one against you, even the Attorney General.
You have to fight for something. The first part of life is working out what you're fighting for, and the next part is doing it. And there are a lot of people that are too afraid to fight. And I don't mean necessarily violence, although most people are afraid of that as well as a concept. The concept of violence itself is so misunderstood. So many people regurgitate the same feminine lie that violence doesn't solve anything. And this is not a Fed post, but violence solves everything. I'm just talking philosophically. If the government wishes to make us illegal and we continue to operate, it needs to use violence to stop us. And if it is capable of this violence, it will stop us. If you commit a crime or you do something that trespasses against another person, the only way to stop said trespass, the only way to punish said criminal is with violence, is with force. So when you hear women, because that's the only people who say it, and when I say that, what I mean is you will hear men say this nonsense as well. Bureaucrats, politicians, school teachers, cowards, pathetic losers, men that don't even deserve to be called men. You'll hear these people say this, and they've learnt it from a woman. They've learnt it from a woman. And they believe that violence never solves anything. You can talk it out. And what the people in America right now are learning, and they're learning the hard way, is you cannot talk these things out. You cannot talk out your racial replacement. Or as Molyneux says, there are no more arguments. There are no more arguments. You cannot debate with a demon. You cannot debate with the devil. You cannot argue with Antifa. You cannot argue with a communist. You cannot argue with a Jew who's dedicating their entire life to destroying you. You cannot argue with an African whose sole purpose in life is to break down and destroy your society and your civilization. There are no arguments with these people. You separate from them. You make, big fences away from them, and if they continue to trespass against you, well, you're left with no other option. So the idea of fighting or striving towards something is the most masculine and purposeful thing that you can do. And it doesn't matter what it is exactly that you are doing, but you must do it. And this is one of the most crucial parts of life that everybody must get inside their head. They must understand it deep inside their psyche and deep inside their soul, that their purpose here is not to be mediocre. It's not to be like these cold and timid souls that neither know victory nor defeat. These pathetic, lukewarm neutrals that think the purpose of life is to go through and not rock the boat. to just go with the flow. And we are in this situation right now as a society and as a people. And I mean, this situation is we are in our downfall. We are in this age of chaos because so many people, so many men, or people that are meant to be men, decided that it was easier to not fight and strive for what is right and what is just. And instead, they gave up their homelands, they gave up their honor, they gave up their pride, they gave up everything that meant something. They've given it up because it was easier to take the 20 pieces of silver and not rock the boat. And this is a motif, this is a metaphor that spans thousands of years. It doesn't matter whether we're talking 3,000 years ago, 500 years ago, or today. There are people who every day put aside their principles, they put aside their values so that they can keep their comfortability, their 20 pieces of silver. And you must work out what it is that you want in this life. You must work out what is just and what is right. You must look deep inside yourself, and you must explore above as well as below. And you must implement that. And if you face obstacles, but you fight on the side of truth and justice and righteousness, then those obstacles are nothing. And it is a battle of the will. It comes down to a battle of the will. Whose will is greater? Is it your will or is it the enemy's? Whose spirit is stronger? Who believes in this more? Will the government shoot us for what we believe? Or will they leave us alone? Whose will is greater? Will we continue doing this? Will we continue on this struggle, in this battle? Or will we give up because it's not convenient, and maybe a nice career and a nice 4-bedroom home with a white picket fence and a Labrador and 2.5 kids might be easier right now to work towards than struggling for the racial survival of our people?
And it looks like the audio was turned off. Okay. Good morning. Good evening. Good afternoon. Good whatever time of day it is. Devon Stack here for the Insomnia stream. I just saw that clip, and I had to post it at the beginning of this stream because it's a lot. It has almost everything to do with what I was going to talk about tonight. In fact, it mirrors very closely a video I did back in 2018, which we'll take a look at maybe a little bit later on, called What is Your Price? What is your price? Because everyone's got a price. Everyone does. Including me. Everyone has a price. And in this video, like I said, we might take a look at it in a minute. I'm essentially asking the audience, and I'm gonna ask you tonight what your price is, because you have a price too. Everyone does. This is why we talk about the slow boil of the frog. And for those of you who don't know the metaphor, I would assume almost everyone does. But when people talk about that, what they mean is, if you want to cook a frog, you put a frog in a warm but not hot yet kettle, and you slowly turn the heat up, slowly. And the frog doesn't notice how warm the water is getting. And by the time the water is hot enough to cook the frog, it's too late for the frog to jump out. Whereas if you had simply cranked up the heat real fast, the frog would be like, whoa, fuck this shit, and leap out of the kettle. And when we talk about the slow boil of the frog, what we're talking about is the slow erosion of rights and the slow decay of the society. Because if it happened all at once, people would say, oh, fuck this, and might actually do something to stop it. But if they slowly turn the heat up, you won't notice until, of course, your skin starts to boil off. And then it's too late. I put it was kind of a revision of a quote out on Telegram, on Twitter, recently. I'm going to read that, and then I'll tell you where I kind of got the idea from. This is from my Telegram. I put, American conservatism exists only to prevent the radical left from becoming complacent. They offer just enough resistance to keep the left engaged and the right pacified. Conservatism is nothing but a subversive, terminal cancer defended by the host it is designed to kill. And where I got that from, someone actually sent me a quote, and it kind of illustrates what we've talked about before, where if you zoom in to a graph, it's real easy to misunderstand the trend. You know, if you trade crypto or if you trade stocks and you're looking at the candles, you're looking at the ups and downs, and you change the increments to where it's like 5 minutes or 1 minute increments, it's impossible to know where that stock or where that cryptocurrency is actually trending, because you're looking at such a small period of time. And so while it might be going up for the last couple hours, it's been tanking for the last several days. But if you zoom into that graph too far, it's impossible for you to see the trend. And a lot of people who have just recently started looking at politics, have just recently started paying attention, whether that's because they're younger or they never really paid attention before. They're like the people that have zoomed in that graph, and they're only looking, the context that they're looking at for the trend lines is maybe just the last year, 2 years, 4 years, whatever. And to them, they're like, oh, well, this isn't so bad, because it's a slow boil of the frog. This stuff takes time. And if you look at just a tiny sliver of that timeline, it's really easy to say, well, yeah, it's not, okay, we're going down a little bit, but, it goes up a little bit here and a little bit there. And so there's still time. We can infiltrate the GOP and turn this around. And that makes sense. That seems plausible if you're just looking at a tiny sliver, if that's your context. If your context of the trend line is just the last couple years, you're like, okay, yeah, there's been some ups and downs, but even I would say, if you look at the trend line even the last 4 years, it's clearly trending down. It's just not the drastic dump. It's not this scary incline, or actually decline. The roller coaster ride, ultimately, because what powers roller coasters is gravity, it's a downtrend. And so if you zoom out the graph and you really see how far we have fallen from the peak, then you can say to yourself, wow, no, this is not something that we can just turn this thing around real quick by infiltrating the GOP. If we use the same tools, because that's essentially what people are saying, right? Let's do exactly what every generation before us has done to fix the problem that no other generation before us has fixed. let's do exactly what the boomers tried. That seemed to work out great, didn't it? Let's sit there and make fun of boomers all day long about how they kicked the can down the road and how they failed to protect the society, but then let's just do exactly what they did. We're the new boomers, called the Zoomers. Zoom, zoom, zoom. We'll do exactly what they tried to do, and then be shocked or in denial when it fails in, say, 40 or 50 years. That's okay. We'll have kicked the can down the road, and maybe our children, those few of us that have had children, maybe they'll try the same thing. Maybe it'll work that time. So we can turn this around. There's still time. So the quote, and someone sent me this, and I apologize if I don't have have your name, so I can give you credit here, but someone did send this to me. And I had actually never heard of this, and I understood the concept of what we're talking about here, but I didn't realize that some of the voices of the past would so closely mirror what we're talking about. And so I'm going to pull this up here, and we're going to read it. All right. Now, to be honest, I had never heard of this guy. But this is zooming the graph out really far. This is 1897. 1897. And what Robert Lewis Dabney said about conservatism in 1897, over 100 years ago, is just as true as it was a century ago today. It may be inferred again that the present movement for women's rights, now you got to remember, in 1897, women could not vote. And this is when this is what I'm talking about. When you see where we've fallen from, right? When you see the peak, like I've talked about before, in the 90s, people were shocked. There was a character on a mainstream television show that was going to be a single mom. They were shocked. Or you could say maybe a couple years later, they were shocked. There was a gay kiss on TV. Oh my God, a gay kiss. They were shocked by violent video games where you were carjacking people. This is terrible. And now all that stuff sounds silly. Well, in 1897, he was shocked that people were talking about letting women vote. You see, when you zoom out the graph and you see the point that we've fallen from, you realize there is no culture war. It's a culture rape. A war implies you're putting up a fight. I mean, I guess if you're getting raped, you're kind of putting up a fight, but if you're getting raped, you're not winning. This is a culture rape. If you think that you're a culture warrior, you're just as retarded as if you're a social justice warrior. It's just as pathetic. All right, so let me continue with this quote here. It may be inferred again that the present movement for women's rights will certainly prevail. So he knew that the conservatives weren't going to actually win any battles in this culture war. From the history of its only opponent, Northern conservatism. See, he knew that the only thing standing in the way of this progressiveness was conservatives who don't fight and don't win. This is a party which never conserves anything. Wow. Doesn't that sound familiar? Doesn't that sound like something that people a century later are still saying, yet somehow that's the opposition? Apparently, if you lose for over 100 years, you still get donations. Because people still zoom the graph in. People are still have no foresight. And still people are afraid to fight. This is a party which never conserves anything. Its history has been that it demurs to each aggression of the Progressive Party and aims to save its credit by a respectable amount of growling, but always acquiesces at the last in the innovation. And that's exactly what conservatives do. They complain. They cry. They object. They are outraged on Twitter. But in the end, they don't stop the progress. You can't stop the progress. And I think it was Eric Stryker said recently on Telegram, progress has no destination. Progress, it's not like I was saying earlier, like they don't get gay marriage and say, okay, we're done. We got what we wanted. No, progress has no finish line. Progress is infinite. What was the resisted novelty of yesterday is today one of the accepted principles of conservatism. Well, kind of like just the gay marriage stuff, right? One of the things that conservatives very loudly objected to not that long ago. I mean, hell, even so-called progressives had to they had to lie about it, but they had to object to gay marriage. That's a perfect example. And now the so-called king of conservatism, Captain Trump, in 2016 was waving the gay flag at campaign events. And a lot of conservatives thought, oh, that's 4D chess. He's going to get the fags to vote for us. It's 4D chess. But then he gets elected and everyone's surprised when, oh my God, he actually means it. Now we've got Lady MAGA. And everyone embraced that. The same things that they were complaining about in that case, in the case of Lady MAGA, right? That's the drag queen stuff. People were complaining about that maybe just a few months, and then Lady MAGA shows up, and oh, that's based tranny. Why? Because conservatives are afraid to fight it. They're afraid to fight it. It is now conservative only in affecting to resist the next innovation, which will tomorrow be forced upon its timidity and will be succeeded by some third revolution to be denounced and then adopted in its turn. Conservatives would denounce gay marriage. And now, if you say that you don't support gay marriage, well, the GOP will probably expel you. The GOP will vote to have you removed. You can't even run for office and be taken seriously if you don't support gay marriage, even though that was a shocking danger coming from the left just a handful of years ago. American conservatism is merely the shadow that follows radicalism as it moves towards perdition. It is the shadow. People like to say, conservatism is just leftism driving the speed limit. It's not even that. It is the shadow. It's just a few steps behind. See, leftism driving the speed limit implies that they're at least driving the car, right? That they're actually they're navigating, that they're choosing the direction that we're going in. No, it's that's being too generous. It's the shadow. It's the shadow of progressivism. And sometimes, every once in a while, to give you the impression that things aren't going as quickly, perhaps the camera will pan over to the right and show you the shadow and say, look, we're still back here. We're still back here on the graph. Don't worry. It remains behind it, but never retards it, and always advances near its leader. Its impotency is not hard, indeed, to explain. It is worthless, because it is the conservatism of expediency only, and not of sturdy principle. Because, once again, as Mr. Dabney here is noticing, as I noticed, the conservatives don't have any principles. And when you don't have any principles, it's real easy to be flexible with these sorts of things, because you have no guiding principles. The only thing guiding your actions is maybe an emotional response to the changes of progressivism, but at the end of the day, you adopt them because you get used to the temperature of the water. You don't have any principles that say, here's a thermometer that you can keep with you. And if the water ever exceeds this temperature, you're in trouble. Get out. Doesn't matter if it still feels okay. Doesn't matter if it doesn't feel life-threatening yet. This temperature is outside any temperature that you're going to experience in nature. And so if it ever gets that warm, you better get out. But see, the principles, they're the thermometer. And without them, you have no thermometer. Without them, you're just reacting to however you feel. Well, this still feels okay. This still doesn't feel like I'm going to die. It's starting a little uncomfortable maybe, but I still feel all right. I feel kind of cozy, maybe even. I mean, jumping, that takes a lot of energy. It intends to risk nothing serious for the sake of the truth, and has no idea of being guilty of the folly of martyrdom. It always, when about to enter a protest, very blandly informs the wild beast, whose path it essays to stop, that its bark is worse than its bite, and that it only means to save its manners by enacting its decent role of resistance. And that's precisely right. It's not there to put up a fight. It's there to maintain appearances. That's all. They're not there to actually provide any kind of resistance to this lurch to the left. It's there only to maintain appearances. which, by the way, as he mentioned earlier, and as I mentioned in my, summation of this, only serves to keep the left engaged. Because just like the QAnon retards and the people on the right who were just MAGA Trump faggots, oh, everything's fine because Trump won the election. Everything's fine. And when did they get engaged? I guess if you could call it engaged a little bit, but instead of engaging to defend principles, because that's not what conservatism or the right was ever really about, what was it, right? It was about preserving Trump. And when did people get more fanatical about preserving Trump? When the media would attack Trump. And because that's all that these people really cared about was the man and not anything that he stood for. When they would attack the man, they would defend the man. That's what they're doing now with this impeachment. Doesn't matter. Honestly, it does. It's almost better if he gets impeached because that means he can't run again. You know, and look, if he wasn't able to accomplish anything in the last 4 years, it's going to be worse. It's going to be 10 times worse because for the next 4 years, people will be trusting some plan again, hoping that upon hope that he's going to do something. And then by the time he runs again, if that ends up being what happens, we'll have lost fucking 12 years. Because people are putting their hopes on a man and not on any kind of principles. The only practical purpose which now serves in American politics is to give enough exercise to radicalism to keep it in wind and to prevent its becoming pursy and lazy. And that's what Trump did, right? That's all Trump did was keep the radical left energized. This whole shadow campaign that we saw Time magazine write an article about. That was something that was 100% driven by hatred of Trump. Not anything he actually did. What did he do? What did he do that Biden didn't just undo over the last few weeks? He was not an existential threat. But because he pissed off the left, he kept the radical left engaged and angry enough, they were able to do what it took to regain power. Not that it was even really necessary, because Trump was simply just the shadow. He was simply the shadow lagging behind where they were going. But because progressivism, again, there is no destination. It must always move forward. It must always keep going. They don't want to look back at the shadow. That's not good enough for them. They want to look ahead. They don't want to look back at Lady MAGA. Didn't you know? Trannies, that's old news. Now we want minor attracted persons. And so by having Trump in office, all it really did was keep the radical left energized. To prevent it from becoming pursy and lazy, from having nothing to whip. See, Trump was the whipping boy. Trump was the boogeyman for the left. No doubt after a few years, when women's suffrage shall have become an accomplished fact, because he knew the conservatives would not stop it. He knew that the conservatives would complain and say, oh no, we can't give women the vote. That's bad. That's so bad. You know, but eventually it wouldn't matter, right? They wouldn't stop it. Eventually it would just it would just happen. He knew this. He knew this. Conservatism will tacitly admit it into its creed, and thenceforth plume itself upon its wise firmness in opposing with similar weapons the extreme of baby suffrage. So what he's saying there is, eventually the conservatives will say, what? Are you saying that allowing women to vote is edgy and bad or no. What we really have to oppose now is baby suffrage. We can't allow them to lower the voting age to 1. Or I guess you could say, in a way, consent. Baby consent. And that's the truth, right? What conservative today? They would look at you like you were insane if you said that you opposed women's suffrage. If you wanted to take women's right to vote away. That's like beyond extreme. You would not be accepted in polite society, certainly not in the public conversation with an extreme view like that, when only a few years ago, well, I guess, a century ago, that was the normal platform. Just as today, if a conservative says that he doesn't believe, that he thinks sodomy is a sin, he can't be taken seriously as a candidate. See, now what we have to oppose is pedophilia. You can't oppose sodomy. What do you think this is? 1995? See, because conservatism is woke. It's just reluctantly woke. And when that too shall have been won, it will be heard declaring that the integrity of the American Constitution requires at least the refusal of suffrage to assess. There it will assume, with great dignity, its final position. Always taking the high road, the gracious loser. Well, this is the system we have. Violence solves nothing. We have to put up a good fight. We have to put up a good show. We have to act as though we're actually trying to stop that which is inevitable. And so, as this quote demonstrates, if you zoom the graph out, and if you realize that in 1897, over a century ago, that the conservative platform included an opposition to women's suffrage. And then you look at where we are today, and you ask yourself, at what point has the right ever made any gains? And I mean gains. Like I've said before, you can say, well, they stopped this thing from happening. Well, maybe for now. Well, they slowed this thing down from happening. Okay, well, again, maybe for now. When have they made gains? Never. Never. That's not a culture war. That's a culture rape. And trying to tell yourself anything differently, it's just a cope. It's this zoomed in look at the graph. Well, we can still win this. You see, guys, what I'm going to do is, we're going to primary all these non-MAGA candidates. Yeah. That'll do it. That's worked before. You're the first one to have that idea. You're either a fool or you're a liar. If you think that that's going to work. Which only makes sense because I think the conservatives consist mostly of fools and liars. It's like when we've talked about Trump. Sometimes it's hard to determine. The 4 years that he was president, it was very difficult to determine, is he a fool or a liar? Because he's one of these two. And that's why it's so important to come to terms with the idea that, these ideas that I've been pushing, that look, this is a failing strategy. It's nothing new. What I'm saying is nothing new. And unfortunately, and this is the black pill, people will probably listen just as much to what I'm saying as what they did to Robert Lewis Dabney here when he said this 100 years ago. He seems pretty black-pilled in his examination of conservatism. He says, look, this will pass. You guys won't really oppose this. And, sooner or later we'll have baby suffrage. I don't think that he quite grasped how bad, what that would really mean. We're going to have baby consent or whatever. But he knew. He was black-pilled. He wasn't saying, conservatives can stop this if this. No. No. And why? Why is it like this? Why is this a black pill? Why is there not a but Devon, what if? Why is this so inevitable and predictable? Well, it's simple, really. It's a cost-benefit equation that people are doing in their heads. Because once again, if you don't have any principles, and no one has any principles these days, or I guess you could say maybe ever, really. You look at this guy's quote, it kind of seems like this has always been, it's not that things it's not that people have gotten worse. It's just that because people are shitty, the situation has just necessarily degraded. But just as the cost back then, what was the cost? Well, I don't want to make all the women mad at me. I want to be accepted in polite society. I want people to invite me to the parties. I want to be seen as a nice guy. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to jeopardize business deals. I don't want to jeopardize comfort. It's uncomfortable to speak out against evil. It takes a lot of courage just to speak out against evil. That's why people keep their head down at their jobs when they work at these subversive companies. because they're afraid. It's fear. And they're doing a cost-benefit equation in their head. And the price is too high for them to pay. They say, well, I guess I could speak out. But then what good would that do? That would just get me fired, and then, you know, that would suck. So I'm just going to keep my head down and just keep plugging away, and then maybe somehow we can still subvert the GOP. You see what I'm saying? And the black pill is people aren't even willing to do things where they're not, where the price is so small. You know, as an example, I remember a few years ago when I was first, you know, when Netflix was going from just being subversive to outright promoting pedophilia. And on Twitter, I would say, like, you know, cancel Netflix, for fuck's sake. You're essentially funding child porn. And the responses I would get from people who follow me on Twitter. Well, I'll cancel it when I finish watching this show. What? I'll stop funding child porn as soon as I finish watching this show. My comfort comes first. Because I don't have any principles. I feel bad. I feel like maybe I should do something. You know, something about this. I have an instinctual response to this that's telling me that, yeah, maybe I shouldn't be funding child porn. But it also feels good to watch this show. And I can very easily just put it out of my mind where my money's going. And live in the fantasy that's on my screen that makes me feel better about it. And because I have no principles telling me that, you know what, no matter how much you enjoy this show, no matter how entertaining it is, this is evil. You just continue to fund it because why? You know, you really like this show. Which, by the way, that's such a pussy way of, not just for the obvious reasons, but like even if like you needed that show to stay alive, you could find the show. It's just that's how fucking lazy people are now. Lazy and fucking stupid. That's where we're at. That is where we're at. That's how small people's price is. That's why they're able to win. And that's why they'll keep winning. Until men decide to be men. Because it's really easy for the ruling class to pay these prices. It's not expensive. Because conservatives are cheap, easy whores. They don't even ask to be taken out to dinner before getting fucked. The price is really low for these people. They might object a little bit and put up a show. Act like, oh, I'm not that kind of girl. But in the end, you are. You don't want to seem rude. And that's why it's a culture rape. And not a culture war, because a culture war requires warriors. And those people don't exist on the right. I mean, the closest thing that we've had to digital soldiers, I mean, who uses that term, right? The Q-tards. And what's their form of digital warfare? I don't know, maybe sharing some wacky videos on their timeline or something like that, and research, or whatever gay shit that they think that is somehow fighting. That's it. And the sad thing is, that's more than a lot of people even do. Yeah, in a war, there has to be two sides fighting it. Conservatives aren't fighting it. It's not a war. It's not a war. People are afraid to fight. People are afraid to sacrifice comfort. And so, I want you to ask yourself, because this afflicts everybody. Everyone does have a price. It's just that if you don't have any principles, that price is probably pretty low. You're probably pretty cheap. If you don't have any defining principles, you're probably very, very cheap. And your price is probably dropping. Because there was probably a point in time that the conservative price was gay marriage, right? Just like right now, there's a lot of conservatives saying that, oh no, this gun control stuff, this red flag law stuff, that's my price, that's my line. Well, I got news for you. Before the Brady Bill was passed in the 90s, the Brady Bill that got rid of automatic weapons, there were people saying the exact same thing. There were people saying that, you know, if they ban automatic weapons, that's going to start the boog. I mean, they called it something different, but that's the line they better not cross. They passed this and there's going to be hell to pay. No, there wasn't. No one did anything because it was too high a price. They did the calculation and said, well, I mean, I guess we could go crazy over this, but I mean, is it really that big of a deal that we don't have automatic weapons? Is that really the hill I want to die on? Is there a hill that anyone wants to die on? And now that's not even something that people talk about. Fuck. Trump banned bump stocks. That was like the closest thing to maybe like, well, we almost have automatic weapons again, kind of. You have this stupid like piece of plastic that you can strap to your gun and like, you know, kind of, you can finagle it a little bit and it's, you know, empty your clip fast. And it's not an automatic weapon at all, but it's like kind of, I guess. Trump, your guy, was like, nope. He got rid of that. Because there's no principles. Trump had no principles that said, hey, you know what? Even if I don't like bump stocks, even if emotionally people are reacting to this very suspicious Las Vegas thing, I'm going to react emotionally, or at least maybe in concert with those who are reacting emotionally. Who knows what was really going on in Trump's head, right? Because as I said before, it's hard to tell sometimes if they're being cowards or liars. But because there were no principles, it was an easy thing to be flaccid about. It was easy to not just say, no, actually, I have these principles that say that, that we shouldn't even have the fucking Brady Bill. There are no principles. Which means that the cost is negligible. I mean, it's like, what's the price if there's no... See, the principles, that's what defines the price. And if there are no principles, well, you're free. Not in the way that, the country music songs mean it. But the way that the slave auctions mean it. Oh, no, that one's free. I mean, I don't even have to bid on him. No, he's just free. He just does whatever. He'll just just maybe crack the whip at him a little bit, but he'll get in the cage. He likes the cage. Is there an Xbox in the cage? Okay, he'll be good. He'll be fine. So I want you to think about it. What's your price? What would it take? At what point would you say, you know what, actually, no. No. Not no, I'm going to complain about it on Twitter. Not no, I'm going to even show up with a sign at a protest. But actually, no. Not doing that. And I will sacrifice whatever it is I'm asked to sacrifice because I'm not doing that. Because that goes against my principles and I'm a principled man. And I'm not doing that. And again, you might think that you have this line. A lot of conservatives think that they have this line, that they've got this principle. But if you rewind 10 years ago, how many of those lines in the sand did they have drawn 10 years ago that have already been trampled by the progressives? They've already moved way past that. And who said no? No one said no. Because the function of conservatives, it's not to actually stop anything or to conserve anything. It's to sell you. It's good cop, bad cop. Think about it that way. Almost everyone's familiar with good cop, bad cop, but to break it down for you, if the police bring you in and they're trying to get information out of you or just trying to convince you to work with them, they have a tried and true method that has worked for centuries. Where you have one cop who's very threatening, very aggressive, a complete asshole, gets in your face, screams at you. And then you have a cop who's a lot more reasonable, who says, I look, I'm on your side. I'm here to help. I understand, you're in a tough situation. You're in a lot of trouble right now, but I'm going to make sure that I'm your ally. I'm here to help you out and make sure that you get out of this. But you got to be honest. You got to tell us what you know. And so they have the bad cop scream and yell while the good cop is saying, I'm here to help, And what does that do? It creates this false binary in your mind. It creates this, as you're sitting here in this, you're locked in a room being guarded by men with guns. And so your brain, in an attempt to assess the situation and try to figure out the best option for survival, thinks, well, I looks like I've got two options here. I can look at this guy who's screaming at me and says I'm going to go to jail for the rest of my life or worse. Or this other guy who seems kind of reasonable and maybe I'll get in a little bit of trouble or something, but he seems like he's going to help me out. When really the third option is to just not cooperate, right? The third option is to just say no. But most people don't have that kind of foresight, that kind of courage. And so inevitably, they fall for the good cop, bad cop. And that's all Republican Democrat is. And the interesting thing is, it works on both sides, right? Because on the left, for the last 4 years, Trump was the bad cop. Not because of anything he did, but because the way that the media painted Trump was, he's Orange Hitler. Orange Hitler. If you could go back in time and kill baby Hitler, wouldn't you do it? Well, here he is now. You got to stop him. Hitler, Hitler, Hitler. Nazi, Nazi, Nazi. Or you can have Biden. Come on, man. Biden. He's a nice, folksy old white man who likes black, tranny, disabled, abominate, whatever. He'll work with you. Yeah, sure, he's not. I mean, you're not going to get out of here. I mean, it's not like, you're going to actually be allowed to leave the prison, but you're here, so why don't you just go with the nice cop? Go with the good cop. And the right does the same thing, or the establishment right does the same thing. It establishes this fake binary. Oh, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. Biden's going to, team up with the Chinese and turn us all into communists and make everyone's babies gay and whatever. But, Trump, and once again, yeah, you're not going to get out of the prison, but at least, you'll get in some trouble. But he seems a little more reasonable. It's not so bad. And you can tell that this works because all you had to do was criticize Trump. And all these people locked into this trauma, this good cop, bad cop trauma. What would they say? What, you like Biden? What are you, a Biden supporter? Because that's the only thing their brain could figure out. They could only see two options. They could only see the good cop and the bad cop. They couldn't imagine another way. They couldn't imagine the Rambo option. For those of you who have seen Rambo First Blood when the cops bring him in. And part of the reason is that the price of that is pretty high, right? The cost of that can be astronomical. And because people seek comfort and not justice, they lose. Because it's real easy for the ruling class to provide comfort. It's not like it used to be. Technology has done a lot of things, but one of the things that technology has done in the West has made it exceptionally easy for the ruling class to provide entertainment and calories, bread and circuses. And at the end of the day, that's really all you need to rule over a people. As long as the bread keeps coming in and as long as the circuses are still performed, everyone is fat and happy. And that used to require more effort on the part of the ruling class. But now not so much. In fact, they've made it profitable. They've made it profitable. The circuses are no longer a budget deficit. They make them richer. They've perfected the art of the circus, if you will. They've monetized it. And they have found several different forms and distribution outlets that these circuses can be performed in front of the slack-jawed, drooling, diabetic coma public. And the same thing with the bread. Not only has technology made it obscenely easy to provide food for even like a midwit society at this point, it's profitable too. And so as long as those two things are true, they remain in control. And those two things, if left alone, will be true in perpetuity unless some crazy thing. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of people got excited, myself included, if I'm being completely honest, about the possibilities of coronavirus when it was first on the scene, before we really knew what was going on with that. When all we could see were these videos coming out of China of people just dropping dead at random, it was a black swan event. It was, oh, this is something that the controllers have no fix for. If there really is like this zombie, see, and this is also why people like zombie fiction, because it would take something that extreme to disrupt this system of control that I'm talking about. It would take an act of God, because people are never going to rise up and overthrow them. But if there's some kind of mysterious outbreak of a disease that can't be stopped that does it for them, it'll accomplish the same thing. But unfortunately, that's all fiction. There's not going to be some plague that wipes out the ruling class, or hobbles the infrastructure to such a degree that they lose control. In fact, that's another thing you could say technology has kind of fixed for the ruling class. What other outside force could possibly interrupt these systems? Well, you could say war, I guess. But even then, I mean, the capabilities of the United States military are such that most people don't even know we're at war. And if they know we're at war, they don't know where. And if they know where, they can't point to it on a map. But they can tell you what's going to happen in the next episode of their circus. They can tell you their favorite flavor of bread. They're so obsessed with their bread, there's like a new word. They're foodies. I'm a foodie. I'm so obsessed with my bread, I'm going to take pictures of it like it's my family. Like it's my children, and post pictures of it on the internet. And other people will be jealous of how delicious my bread is. I'm going to write blogs about how good my bread is. I'll rate my bread. And the same is true of the circuses, right? There's circuses about the circuses, which are also profitable, I might add. People obsessed with the circuses, people jumping up and down, excited, posting, "Oh my God, I can't wait for the next game to come out. Oh, I'm so psyched for this next movie. Oh, I didn't realize what my life really needed was more Star Wars films or the next PlayStation." There's a lot of people, their entire life revolves around the circus. The only thing that even comes close to, or nothing comes close to providing the kind of meaning that these people get out of the circus. That is their life. Their life is the bread and the circus. They're not going to sacrifice access to the bread or the circus. That's everything, that's all the meaning that's in their life. And you could say the same thing, like, look, you could say that the QAnon phenomenon, for example, was a circus. It was a circus for people who were no longer interested in the other circuses because those other circuses were becoming openly hostile to these people. It's hard to enjoy the circus when the storyline is about your genocide, when the storyline is about how awesome it is that they're replacing you, when the storyline is that everything you believe in is really evil and shitty and bad. And so, what do? Well, you certainly don't attack or burn down the circus. No, you just find another circus. You find a circus you can believe in. And then you sit down and Watch the circus. And that's it. And you wonder why it's clown world. Dun 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 la da 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 la da 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 da. I wonder why. Wonder why there'd be clowns at the fucking circus. All right, I'm going to play a video I did back in 2018. Back in 2018. And then we'll take a look at chat. But this is something, like I said, I've talked about this before. This is not a new thing. And in fact, you know, this guy basically talked about this over 100 years ago. And I'm not telling you this because I think it's going to change fundamentally the world. It's not. It's not. It's not. But it might help you understand why we're in this situation. It might motivate you to prepare for what I think will possibly happen if the bread or the circuses are interrupted. But that's what would have to happen. That's what would have to change. Because that's the price of most people. Which is really pathetic. I would say it's selling yourself short, but with a lot of these people, it's really not. It's really not. They're cheap for a reason. All right, let's take a look here. When we talk about the future, people often remark that things will have to get a lot worse before they get better. But we never really talk about what that means or why. The short answer is that some of you are being paid for your silence. Paid to stay in line. Paid to keep your head down and your mouth shut. Paid to circle the drain a little bit longer, clinging to the life preservers of others. And you're so satisfied with these payments, your 30 pieces of silver, you won't bite that hand that's feeding you. Not until your lungs are already full of the mud and muck, the rising quicksand that's just below your chin. And then, of course, when you finally find your voice, it won't be a battle cry. It'll be a desperate plea for help. You'll frantically search for not brothers to fight side by side with you, but another hand to feed you. That is why it must get worse. It must get worse because everyone has their price, and while most people love to spew patriotic platitudes, they don't really value freedom. It's far too expensive. They can't afford integrity. They can't even afford a future for their children. The truly disgusting thing about these people is they're often the same people who will point to those who stand in the welfare lines and imagine how they're so much better than them. They sneer and pontificate. They'll say to each other in superior tones, "Look at them, not working for the masters. That is why I have far better trinkets." Yes, they take their alpha slave trophies very seriously. And so I have only one question. Which of these trinkets that keep you pacified would you have to lose before you finally decided to be a free man? Everyone has their price. What's your price? Which of these shiny objects would you have to lose before you finally decided to live up to the call of your ancestors, or if not yours, mine, ancestors whose country has been so ravaged by the neglect of their children and the strangers that have been allowed within the gates that to them it would be unrecognizable. What is your price? What is the novelty that keeps you so pacified? Pacified enough that, oh sure, you're angry about the corruption and the flourishing evil, but not angry enough to act. Please tell me, what is this entertainment that's so amusing? That you're aware of the danger, but you're far too distracted to protect your family from it. What is so goddamn titillating that you have chosen not to act? I honestly want to know. I need to know. Which of these gold stars, these certificates of servitude and souvenirs of subjugation would have to be smashed before you stand up to the ruling class? Please, for the love of God, I'm begging you, tell me what is your price? Because the rest of us, we're going to have to pay it. And that's what it is at the end of the day. Someone's paying for that price. It's not the ruling class. I just told you they're making money off of this. All right, let's take a look at chat here. Can you please put together an email news alert list so we still hear from you if you get kicked off of everything? I guess I could. A lot of people don't like getting on lists. I can understand why. But we could definitely... for now, I just say Telegram. I know people are freaked out that Telegram's going to get go the way of Twitter and everyone else, and that's possible, but they'll never get rid of all the platforms all at the same time, or maybe they will, I don't know. But I would say that if you follow me on Gab and follow me on Twitter and on Telegram and everything, it's highly unlikely that it would just all disappear. And even though I haven't updated the website, blackpilled.com, in like at least a year, actually, it's that, that'll always be there. So if worst case scenario, you could always go there, right? But that's asking you have to do something. You have to be a little proactive. That's not a big deal. I mean, if you can't handle the proactiveness of just going to a website, I guess that's your price, right? You have to be alerted. I don't know. Maybe we could do something like that, though. But like I said, there's a lot of people who wouldn't want to be on any kind of email list. I guess you could be on an email list if it's like a Proton email that you don't care about. Something like that. We can maybe work something out. Oh, yeah. Someone says, talk about the 10 pounds of C4. And for those of you who are not aware of that, see, the other side of this, the other side of what we're talking about is the fact that the ruling class is afraid of people acting. They're legitimately afraid. It's impossible to look at what's going on in DC and to determine anything other than they are afraid of people having enough of the bread and circuses. The military presence that is in DC is a direct result of that fear. And because they are experts at maintaining their place in the hierarchy, because they don't actually bring value to the society. They realize this. They realize that if they had been born to any other family, that they would be working at a McDonald's. They would just be a cog in the machine that they administer. They don't actually have, and there's nothing special about them. There's nothing elite about the elites. That doesn't mean that they're all idiots. There's a lot of really smart ones, but they also understand, because the system is purposely designed this way, that it doesn't matter if you're brilliant in many cases. You are still going to be a product of your circumstances. You're still going to be stuck in the lane that you were born in, right? I don't think there's a lot of people who actually think that Donald Trump, just as an example, would have had any kind of empire had he been born Donald Trump in a middle-class family instead of Donald Trump, son of Fred Trump, who could loan him $100 million to get started. If Donald Trump was just a random guy that had to make it on his own, he would just be another cog in the machine. I mean, hell, his brother couldn't even make it with all the shortcuts he was given, right? He died an alcoholic. So Trump might have been maybe one of the more successful in his family, meaning that he would have the white picket fence, you know, he'd have the McMansion or whatever. And his brother would have died in rehab somewhere and whatever. But certainly would never have been president. And you can look back at all these guys and say the same thing, right? You think George Bush, especially Jr., you think he would have, he'd be president? You think his brother would have been governor of Florida? No, certainly not. Certainly not. And they know that. These people know that. These people know that if they were asked to compete on an even playing field, they would be nobodies. They would be victims of the system that they have helped create and help maintain. So they fear a slave revolt. And because there's a certain amount of boiling of the frog, I guess, that has to take place when they want to overstep their bounds. They have to basically do the same thing, right? So if they realize that their compatriots in the ruling class, if they feel too comfortable, if they feel too safe, they're not going to be willing to turn the heat up on the slaves, right? They have to get or wake up their other friends in the ruling class from their slumber, from their bread, their circuses. So what they have to do is they create false flags. And so when they see danger, they sense danger or the chance that the slave revolt might happen, in order to kick people into action, other ruling class members into action. You know, they'll do stuff, well, like the 6th, right? They'll say, "Oh my God, it was a insurrection. Oh my God, it was terrible." And they'll describe it in this hyperbolic way in order to create fear in the hearts and minds of other ruling class members. So the other ruling class members will be motivated to get on board with whatever new controls are necessary to keep the slaves in line. And they'll do the false flags because it's easier for them to defend themselves against a fake revolt that they engineered than it is for them to control one that they didn't start and they have no, they don't have any control over. And I suspect that there's something like that in the making. We don't know when or how or what, but certainly the missing C4 stuff. Let me bring that up if I have it. I think I've got a screenshot. If not, I'll just take it off my Telegram real quick. But I'll just, I'm going to look up the story here. Because some C4 went missing in California. All right, so this is from Fox News. I don't know enough about C4 to know how big of a deal it is, but it sounds like a big deal. They said 10 pounds of C4 is missing. And again, I don't know how much 10 pounds of C4 is, but that sounds like a lot to me. All right, so here we go. Around 10 pounds of explosives have vanished from a Marine Corps base in Southern California, reports said Thursday. The explosives, identified as C4, were being stored at the Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center, 29 Palms in San Bernardino County, east of Los Angeles. KGTV TV of San Diego first reported, citing a source with knowledge of the situation. Out of respect for the investigative process, NCIS does not comment on or confirm details relating to ongoing investigations. Navy Criminal Investigation Services spokesman Jeff Houston told Fox in an email early Friday, the C4 disappeared during a long training exercise 2 weeks earlier and may have been stolen. A reward was being offered for its safe return, the San Diego station reported. C4 is a high-powered explosive, and 1/10 of the amount, or I guess this is where they're going to tell us how much it is, 1/10 of the amount stolen could blow up a car. So I guess that's not, it's still a lot. You blow up 10 cars, but that's not like, I don't know. It still doesn't sound like as much as I thought it was. So there you go. So it's real difficult to see a story like that and not at least theorize that perhaps they're setting something up, that they're saying, what have we heard for like the last month or two? That there's all these extremists in the military, right? There's all these extremists that need to be purged from the military. Oh my God, now we've got missing C4 from the military. Perhaps one of those extremists have stolen C4 from the military base. And so now, if in a couple months or whenever we have some kind of attack, they can say, oh, look, see, it was the extremists stole that C4, and now we have to really take seriously this purge of the military. And then all the people in the ruling class will be on board for this purge in the military to go into high gear. And again, we don't know. I mean, like, it's the government, right? It's entirely possible they just lost 10 pounds of C4. Or they stole it themselves. In one way or another. But it certainly isn't it's not a comforting headline in any way. No matter how you look at it, missing 10 pounds of missing C4 from the military, given or in any situation really, but specifically in our situation, not a real comforting, nice, happy headline to read. Yeah, there it is. There it is. So don't be too surprised if some shenanigans involving C4 takes place in the next little bit. And this is just the groundwork. And I say that not because, crazy conspiracy. I mean, this is usually how this stuff gets rolled out. A lot of people don't maybe necessarily remember the base, which was like this fake white supremacist group that was run by like the FBI and stuff to try to entrap so-called white supremacist terrorists or whatever. I remember when they the first you heard about it, it was like a story like that. It was like this not on the front page, kind of like, you almost had to be looking for it, kind of a story that got dropped into the media saying, oh yeah, the leader of the base, this blonde guy, who's the leader of this white supremacist group, they're worried about him entering Canada or something like that. And you look at the photo of the guy they released. First of all, he didn't even look real. To this day, I'm not sure if it's a photo of an agent or a totally made up photo. But the picture that they released of this guy looked like, those websites you can go to and AI will just generate a fake face. Like, it looked like one of those. He didn't look like a real person. And like I said, to this day, I'm not sure if he is. And we wouldn't know, right? Because if he was an agent, they're not going to tell us his identity. But I suspect that wasn't even like a real person. And they released that, and then, you don't hear anything about it for a few months. And then suddenly, oh, the base. The FBI has taken down the base. And then you find out later that it was the FBI. Take a look at chat again. We had a dude on iFunny get caught up on in the base. Yeah, see, that's the stupid thing is, it's not like a lot of people, their fear of organizing or even resisting a lot of this stuff is the fear of, feds. And that's not a crazy fear to have. But it's relatively easy to not get caught up in something stupid like that. Stupid and LARPy like that. When I say people need to stop just complaining and actually do something, I'm not saying if some guy in a random Discord server starts Fed posting that you say, yeah, let's totally do this illegal stuff. And, whatever, go with your crazy Fed plan. You got to use your head. Because they absolutely are trying to entrap frustrated people. And they absolutely are looking to lie and reframe anything that actually does happen, like on the Capitol protest. Like, I'm calling it a protest. People call it a riot. It was a protest. It was a mostly peaceful protest. But they've turned that into basically an attempted fucking coup. So you just got to be smart. You got to realize that, yeah, you're not, these guys aren't amateurs. Let's take a look at chat again here. People keep talking about the Rage Against the Machine video that I posted on Telegram. We don't have time to go over that tonight, but maybe that's something we'll do next stream. But there is a video on my Telegram, basically a pro-white genocide video on my Telegram that was put out by Rage Against the Machine. And like I said, this is the normalization of white genocide. If people think, and a lot of people do, if people think that when I talk about white genocide as an imminent threat that I'm peddling fear. You're a fear merchant. You're just trying to scare people. No. I know nothing's going to change. I know that people are just like with all these genocides in the past. Every time there's a genocide, there's always people, the smoke alarm's always going off telling people, "Hey, get out of the house. Get out of the house. The place is on fire." And inevitably, because if they had listened, there wouldn't be a genocide, right? Inevitably, people just say the same things that they say to me now. They say, "Oh, you're just blowing this out of proportion. That's crazy. That's never going to happen." Okay, well, you got to understand, this shit does happen, or there never would have been a genocide, right? Every time in the history of the world that there's been a genocide, every single time, someone has said, "Hey, we need to watch out. I think they're going to genocide us." And every time, people didn't listen. Every time they thought, "Oh, you're just being a pessimist." Well, if that was the case every time, there'd never ever be a genocide, ever. Now, just like with anything, people talk about, oh, it's how warfare has evolved. It's fourth generation warfare, and now it's fifth generation warfare, and whatever. Just like that, just like anything, it evolves. Genocides evolve. The technology available to people who want to commit genocide has evolved significantly. If you get the same results with lower risk and more efficiency by leveraging technology and the hierarchy that you control, to commit a genocide without having to go door to door and shooting people in front of their houses, which opens you up to some significant risk, right? If you can accomplish the same thing through other means, you're going to do it. I mean, the point of the genocide isn't to, I'm sure for some people it would be, but like the point of the genocide isn't to enjoy the bloodlust of dragging people out of their homes and shooting them in the street and just like letting the cleansing feeling wash over you as you remove the evil Nazi from the world. I'm sure there's people where that absolutely would be why they'd want to do it. But the ruling class, they're not like that. They're not stupid. So the point of the genocide really is just to get rid of that population because it poses a problem. If you have a population that you need to get rid of, you get rid of it. If it means these people will do anything to maintain their position in the hierarchy. Anything. Again, it's just like with that quote from the conservative criticism from 100 years ago. You can look back at history and see that the more things change, the more they stay the same. The ruling class has never been shy about committing genocide to maintain their position in the hierarchy. Any more than a cattle rancher would be shy about wiping out an entire herd if it posed a threat to his business. If there was, just as an example, if you're a rancher and you've got some disease that's spreading around, and it's gonna, if you don't nip this in the bud, it's gonna take out your entire business. So you do it like the Chinese do. Like, I think you guys have seen that video where they just bulldozed pigs into like a giant pit and just burned them all up. They have no problem doing that. And don't think that they don't look at you as just a bunch of little piggies that they can bulldoze into a fiery pit. They absolutely will do that without any problem, with no crisis of conscience, because it's for the greater good. So even if they, these sociopaths wouldn't feel emotion, but like even if somehow they felt a little bit of emotion watching the videos of the pigs being bulldozed into the pit, it's all right. It was to save. We sure, it looks cruel now, right? But it's to save the swine industry. It had to be done. So that's the difference between you and them. That's why they're the ruling class and you're not. They do what needs to be done. Simple as that. Really, simple as that. That is really that's when it comes right down to it, that is what separates you from the ruling class. Is the ruling class does what needs to be done. And so it gets done, and they're in charge. Let me take a look here at chat. Chinese bulldoze entire ethnic minorities like the Tibetans. Yeah, the Chinese are, look, they're efficient sociopaths. They're very efficient. And you got to respect that, I guess, on some level. Their society has been around a really long time, far longer than the American. Anything American. America. Have you heard about the legacy preferences when applying into American universities like Harvard? If your parents were there, you are more likely to get it. Sounds like something specifically designed to preserve power of the ruling class. Absolutely. Obviously. Obviously, that's true. That's those organizations. You gotta remember that, like, a lot of these elite institutions, they exist primarily to promote the continuation of power in certain bloodlines. That's why they exist. Skull and Bones, these kinds of groups within these universities. That's just like an extreme version of what the university itself is there to do. Like I said, not that these people are idiots, but a lot of them aren't that bright. And you don't need to be that bright to maintain. You have to be really, really clever to go from nothing to ruling class. And that almost never happens because of that, right? Because that's not even enough. You also have to, circumstance, all this other shit has to go into that. And some of these people, if you go back far enough, you'll find, the guy in their family that did that. But once that's done, it's pretty hard to fuck it up. And a lot of these institutions exist primarily to teach these midwits how to not fuck it up and to create these networks to help each other not fuck it up. One of the things that really affected my career when I was trying to get into filmmaking and all that stuff, that I realized wasn't so much a lack of knowledge of the art of filmmaking and that sort of a thing. And it wasn't even 100% because I wasn't Jewish, although that did play into it. It was more that it's just like any other industry. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And because I didn't go to some fancy film school, and my parents weren't, famous producers or actors or whatever. It was from the outside coming in. It was nearly impossible, unless you were talking like the very lowest rungs of the ladder, right? You look at a lot of people in Hollywood. It's just like in finance. For a lot of these people, you have to be born into it. It's maybe not quite as extreme as the finance world, but it's very, very similar. Very similar. Anything with power, that's how it is. Anything with power, that's how it works. Let me take a look here. Something that usually comes up in chat when you're late is whether or not you like us or not. No, why? Well, first of all, why would you care? But no, I know I don't interact so much with the audience as much as maybe a lot of people. But that's not because I don't like you guys or anything like that. It just I'm way more introverted, I think, than people realize. I'm the kind of person that is really comfortable. Like, one of the reasons why I took to 3D animation so well is you really have to, if you're going to do that kind of work, you have to be able to just sit in a room by yourself for sometimes a week without sleep. And you'll hear stories of people at Pixar that work there. Like, it sounds like a nightmare job, really, but that's what it is. It's like a warehouse of all these cubicles, and they're literally sleeping under their desk because it's just this tedious, repetitive, whatever. And my brain is just like, it's okay with that. And in the same way that I'm okay with living out in the desert, very secluded, right? I'm comfortable. In fact, I would even say solitude is kind of like my natural state. And so it's not so much that, I don't know, maybe I'm just like socially weird. So, but no, of course I like you guys. Like, I couldn't do this without you guys. I wouldn't do it without you guys. If you guys weren't here, I would just be screaming into the void. What would be the point? But yeah, it does. I'm not gonna like just to be perfectly honest with you guys. It drains me a little bit. It's not quite as much. Doing it like this isn't as bad as if I had to go and present like a big presentation to a large auditorium or something like that, which is something I've done before and I can do. It's not that I can't do it, but it's not my default position, and it's hard to describe. I think other introverts in the audience will know exactly what I'm talking about. But when you do that, it takes a lot out of you, So what ends up happening is, I'll do that and I'll just feel like, not like a stream, but like if I go do a presentation in front of an auditorium full of people and I have to answer a lot of questions afterwards and stuff like that, and I've done that, and it's in the moment, it's not that it's stressful. It's kind of hard to explain, but it doesn't matter. Afterwards, it's like you just want to like go to your hotel room and just lock the door and not see people for a while. Like it takes a lot out of you. And so I think maybe in a way to manage that, and look, that's not, in some ways that's kind of an excuse, right? Because I don't think this is like a good thing. I don't like it when people say like, well, I'm an introvert, so therefore I can act like a weirdo. It's like, nah, not really. I mean, it's descriptive, like if you say, well, I'm an introvert. Okay, well, now I kind of understand some of your behaviors maybe now, but it's not an excuse for it, right? Like when I talk about how I'm not good at community building, but that's something we need to do, that I'm just being descriptive. I'm not saying like, well, I'm not good at community building, therefore we're not going to do it. No, we're going to do it. It's not going to be something that comes easy to me, right? And so there's that. Plus, you guys got to understand, I got a whole lot of other shit going on. Even just today, I chopped down 8 fucking trees, I think, today. Big ones. Like if you guys have been following the pillbox, I guess, you know that I had to, when I first moved here, the property was just covered in dead trees because whoever lived here before me planted a bunch of trees that had no business living in the desert, and they didn't. As soon as they stopped getting watered regularly, they all died. And so I had to chop down something like 30 fucking trees. Like, it was a lot. And I only have like 3 trees left on the property now. No, well, I mean, I've planted some new ones, but there's only like 3 of the original trees left because I had another big tree get blown down in a storm, and I just said, fuck it. And even the ones that were still kind of alive, I just took them all out. So I got stuff like that I'm doing. Yeah, I am working on getting book 2 out the door as soon as possible. If you guys, I know not everyone believes that, but I promise it is getting worked on. Same thing with the Simpsons video, all that stuff. So my plate's pretty full, and so I just, and I'm terrible with names. I know I don't acknowledge a lot of you guys by name. It's not out of anything that's it's not out of disrespect. Because I very much, like I said, I couldn't do this without you guys, and I wouldn't do this without you guys. But I'm awful with names. I'm really good with faces, but I don't see any of your faces. So hopefully that I don't want you guys to feel bad. All right, let's see here. I just got done reading your book. Eve and Alice Green seem like the more realistic characters. I'm beginning to suspect they're based on real people. Will your Subscribe Star supporters get a sneak peek at book 2? Yeah, well, last time what I did was on Patreon, I gave everyone a sneak peek of, I read the first chapter of the book, and I released that. I eventually put it on the channel, but like I gave the Patreon people maybe a heads up on that. We could do something like that. Maybe I could do, maybe that's an argument to do different tiers, right? Maybe I could do like a tier of Subscribe Star where I just, especially because it's banned in most places, maybe I just give you guys the audiobook of book 1 when I release book 2 or something like that. I don't know. That's something that I've been trying to think of a way, because it really pisses me off. Speaking of things that take a lot of time, I spent so much time recording, even though the audiobook's it's just north of 5 hours. It doesn't mean that it only took me 5 hours to read it. Okay. It took like 2 weeks of me reading it and fucking up and reading it and fucking up. And then to edit something that's like over 5 hours long, that takes a really long time. And it has to be perfect, right? Because it had to meet all of these standards. And then I had to work Audible. That was the other thing too, is Audible was like, oh, you need to change this, weird technical problem with this file or whatever. And it was such a nightmare getting that out the door. And then they banned it. It was so frustrating. And so it's annoying that I spent so much time on that, and not a lot of people probably had access to it. As we've discovered, apparently you can get it on Walmart, walmart.com. I guess is one of the few places you can still get it, weirdly enough. But yeah, I was thinking maybe I would just release the audiobook of book 1 to the Patreons and Subscribe Star people or something like that. Let's take a look here. Oh, and as far as the characters being based on people, yeah, I think that's pretty transparent. Well, at least, especially with Alice Green. Can you try using soundcard digital modes like Olivia and JS8Call instead of Morse, so we gain 2 more magnitudes of signal still being recognizable? I believe it's the only thing that can salvage radio idea by giving us much better chance. Maybe. I mean, the problem with that is, well, A, I've never done that, so I'd have to figure out how to do that. I'm sure it's not that hard. B, the radios that I have are old and sometimes drift, and my understanding is a lot of these modes don't work so well if you're drifting at all. So it's something we could try, certainly. I have to read up on it. How are you going to know if we're able to decode your secret message within the secret message? Well, I don't have that. I was going to do that tonight. I do have a secret message, but it's not as the clever one. I will have ways of finding out. You know, it might be maybe it'll be, who knows, maybe it'll be like a URL that you can go to, and then it'll just see how many times people have hit that URL, and I'll be able to track it that way. You're a lumberjack and you don't care. Work all day, sleep all day. On the Wednesday, you go masking the post office. And well, that's another thing. I got to go. I haven't been back there yet. I was supposed to go back. I got some stuff that showed up. I'm not going to do. I'm probably not going to do the GIMP mask thing. That's a little too much. Like I said, it'd be one thing if I was in a big city and I didn't give a fuck, like no one's going to know who I am. But if I do that here, people will talk. They'll think that I'm into some stuff that I'm not into. The article about Robert Lewis Dabney was sent to you by Whitepilled. Asked you to mod them last week. I think he's a great guy. Please mod them. Okay. Yeah, I think you're right, actually. Let me see here. Why is it not? I hate the Trovo. The Trovo interface for when you're streaming is just fucking awful. Because I click their name and like I can ban them, but I can. Oh, here we go. They have been modded, I think. So, why don't you like transhumanism? Idea of improving your body with machines sounds good. I am playing a bit of devil's advocate here. I think the answer to that would be kind of what JF talks about with the revolutionary phenotype. I think that the eventuality, if you go down that road, what that ends up being with all, the body modification stuff. First of all, it's hard to argue against being trans and all this other stuff and just deciding whatever gender you want and to be consistent, right? If you are pro all this transhumanist shit. Because it's at that point, well, why should you care the way that God has created you? Why should you care the way that you've evolved if you don't believe in God, the way that nature has created you? If you're just going to, fuck it all up in some laboratory somewhere anyway, why does it matter if you chop your dick off or what? Why should it matter? Maybe you see that as just a part of the natural evolution of things. But I see the same danger that JF has laid out in his book, The Revolutionary Phenotype, where that leads. And it won't happen overnight, but where that eventually leads, just to kind of sum it up. It's a good book, but to kind of sum it up in a way that's easy to digest. Right now, and again, we'll leave God out of the whole equation just because it's compatible either way. But right now, the way that your traits are passed down to your children is using DNA, right? So the 50% roughly of your DNA and 50% of your wife's DNA creates a kid, and through natural selection, or meritocracy, or however you want to look at it, the product of that is going to either be rewarded by having the ability to also pass their DNA down the line, or be punished because it's a inferior mix or whatever, right? And not be able to pass on their genes. And that's the system that humanity has been using. Again, God or no God, doesn't really matter. That is the system that has been used to pass on traits. And it's not a perfect system. You can have mutations. You can have all these other problems. But it's humanity. That is the system that works for most animals on the planet, using DNA. And if we cease to leave it up to DNA and start to use another system to decide what genetic traits that you're going to have in the next crop of babies or whatever. Eventually, that system that's picking and choosing which traits are useful and which traits are not useful, eventually we'll end up, and again, won't happen overnight, this is down the road quite a ways, but we will end up like insects. We will end up like a beehive, where there'll be a central hub, like in a beehive, just as an example. The queen bee is holds all the genetics. She's the mother of every single bee in the beehive. And while you won't just have a bee laying eggs and like humans popping out of eggs, ultimately you will have a situation where there is a whether it's a company or an AI or maybe like the futuristic version of Mark Zuckerberg, or someone is going to be deciding the genetic makeup of humans, like what's best. And because of that, just like with the hierarchy, we talk about how the ruling class, their first priority is to maintain the hierarchy that keeps them at the top. Above all else, what's important to the ruling class is keeping them at the top. Well, this system is going to act the same way. Every system, their first, not even just the ruling class, I would say every system, its first priority is to maintain itself, right? So if you create a system that is deciding the genetic makeup of everyone who's ever going to live, the first priority of that system is going to be to maintain itself. And that's going to factor in to who it decides, or just rather the genetic makeup of the people it's creating. And it's necessarily going to create people, or I guess if you call them people still, people that exist to serve that system. And it might be subtle at first, right? But eventually we'll turn out to be like insects serving a queen. And again, that's way down the road. And if you want to read something that addresses all this stuff in far more detail, I would check out JF's book. But that is why. I think there's something special about humanity. That's the state in which that's what I want to. That's the system I want to preserve. Let me put it that way. And maybe it's as simple as just because I'm part of that system, I want to preserve that system. Okay, I don't care. I still want to preserve that system. And I want to preserve that system in perpetuity. And I see altering that system in such a significant way, using stuff like mRNA and CRISPR and all this other stuff that's coming out. I see it as a threat to the system that created me, and that will hopefully continue to create humans. I see it as a competing entity that will eventually wipe out humans. And I don't mean like in some Skynet kind of a way, although that's, I guess, a possibility. But humans will cease to exist if we take that leap and start altering ourselves. And, it doesn't have to be DNA. Like you mentioned, just the technology side of things. Already it's fucking with us. Having these phones, like everyone has this phone, right, in your pocket that you use. It's almost like a part of your brain now. Now, at least with the phone, it's external and you can leave it at home. Most people don't, but you can. Like, you have that choice. But especially if you start putting chips in people's minds, it's bad enough when the government can hack your phone and listen to all of your conversations by activating the microphone or activating the camera without your knowledge. Okay, well, the last thing I want is for them to be able to hack the chip in people's heads and access your thoughts and influence your thoughts. And so while it might be great to be able to, without having to look at a phone, like to be able to just think about porn and you can see porn in your head, like that's, you know, whatever stupid fantasy people have that this is going to, I can play a video game just by thinking about the video game, or I can send an email just by, you know, whatever stupid advancement they think they're going to, you know, whatever benefit they think they're going to get out of this. The side effect is, I mean, you think that, again, the hierarchy, their first priority is maintaining the hierarchy. And who do you think is going to be deploying this technology? The people developing, deploying, and regulating this technology are going to be the same people that are going to seek to preserve their position of power. And so, again, necessarily that'll mean that it'll be used to control people. And you can, like I said, you can put your phone down, you can destroy your phone, you can separate yourself from the technology. Transhumanism is a merging of the technology with the human, which would mean that you wouldn't be able to separate the two. So that's why I'm against that. The secret URL should be a link to a forum for our community building. Well, that might be, see, here's the thing. The secret URL might just be another step in the secret message. I feel like if we do like a secret forum, and that's not a bad idea. I mean, and it's, by the way, that doesn't mean like a secret forum to Fed post in. I'm just saying if we do like a secret forum, there should be degrees of how far up in the puzzle you get, right? So like the URL will have another secret message in it, and then another, you know, and I don't know how ridiculous I want to get with it, but I've just been kind of thinking, because there's easy ways to do this stuff where it will weed people out, and it might be a cool way to just weed people out. And by the time you get to the end, again, I don't want to go too crazy with it, but you'll be left with the higher IQ people, which might be a good thing. Or the people that, like, if people start leaking it, the people that just know how to find the leaks, I guess. I don't know. All right. Well, guys, we're over the 2-hour mark. I think I'm going to wrap things up pretty soon here. Someone said maybe I could put clues in the next book. It's kind of too late for that. Maybe I could put something in the back of it or something, but I mean, that's I guess an interesting marketing tactic. Force people to buy the book. Oh, to get to the next level, you have to purchase the book. I'd feel a little scammy if I did that. But I don't know. Maybe I guess you could say that could serve as an economic filter, right? So in order to get to the next level, you have to prove that your economic viability, or I don't know. It still seems a little scammy to me. The secret message Morse code? No, the secret message. Although that could probably be part of one of the things. All right, guys. Speaking of secret messages, I will play tonight's secret message. And again, if you've learned to decode one of them, you've learned to decode them all. And this one's nothing special. It was a little hastily put together because I cut down all those trees today. And one of the reasons why I'm a little late again is my nap went a little longer than I expected, because I was out for at least 8 hours today, just chainsawing down trees. And I had to do it in phases because I didn't want it to, especially where a lot of these trees were, if I dropped them in the wrong direction or whatever, they would crush a bunch of cactuses or in some cases like a shed or a chicken coop and stuff like that. So it was real tricky to take down some of these fucking trees. And even doing, I got pretty okay at dropping trees in the direction I want them to go, but there's some it's almost impossible, because like they, if you want them to drop one way, but they're totally slanted in the other direction, you got to climb up and cut limbs off, and it's just it's tedious. And so I was pretty tired after doing that all day long and slept a little bit longer than I expected. But anyway, All right, guys, without further ado, here is tonight's secret message.
Warning. If you are not authorized to receive this message, or if you are wearing headphones, you are advised to temporarily reduce the volume of this transmission. If this is a recording of a previous transmission, you may advance the timeline by approximately 1 minute.
You have been chosen to receive a secret Blackpilled transmission. Stand by for secret pillbox message transmission. Transmission will commence in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Transmission begin. Transmission complete.
All right, so hopefully you guys received that message, the fancy message. I might mix it up a little bit for those of you who have been receiving the message. I might change format so we can get some. The only problem is the reason I settled on this format is it seemed to be the most bang for the buck. Like it seemed to be able to deliver the most clarity in the shortest period of time. Because if you try to do, because you can do like full, much better resolution and all this other stuff, but then you're having to like listen to it for like a minute, and already that's too long the way that it is now. I could go shorter, but then you get the opposite problem. Like I think there's one protocol that's only like 8 seconds, but then it's illegible. So, and yep, people have received the message. People have received the message. Excellent. All right, guys. Hope you have a good rest of your day, whenever that is, or a good night's sleep or morning sleep or whatever. I will keep everyone updated on things that are happening. And yes, I do appreciate you guys. Don't think that I don't. When I'm super late, it's not because of anything personal. It's because I was asleep, most likely, like tonight. And I will be getting, I'll try to think of something for like the subscribe star people and stuff in terms of the book. I think that's probably a good idea. There might be something to do with that. I just really suck at this, this sort of, I don't have a mind for, my brain doesn't work. I don't have like the Jewish part of the brain that figures out ways to like monetize everything that I do, because that's not what I'm doing. It's not why I'm doing it. So that's not where my brain typically goes. But maybe I need to at least in some ways maybe think a little more like that and try to figure out a way of having different tiers and benefits and stuff like that. But anyway, hope you guys have a good
Gangster, mafiotic, necroitic, the Black Frank Gelada, a gangster judge, therefore unprosecutable, the blackish, menial, necroitic in appearance and demeanor, felon, vicious, parroting puppet, ex-district attorney, Nassau County, and watch my Frankenstein eyesight television playback of this felonious, lowly, sodomistic display by the felon, sodomist Judge William Sullivan and his lowly felon slut wife during my trial in Nassau County.